Do you think this budget averts the deterioration of our fiscal problem?
Well, as I said, we're not claiming this solves all the problems facing the country, but it does meet the critical, essential test,
which is
of restoring our deficits to a more sustainable position for the next 10 years. And the test there, which is a test you embrace in your plan too, is to make sure you get deficits down below 3% of GDP and hold them there. And if you do that, then what happens is our overall debt burden as a share of the economy stops growing at a level we can manage and starts to come down. So we meet that test, and we help lower the trajectory of cost growth in the outer decades that comes from millions of Americans retiring, but we still would face, even with this framework, more work to do on that long-term demographic challenge.
Well, bring up slide 13, because I just don't see the rhetoric matching the results. And I'm looking out of your budget, page 58 in analytical perspectives. You say that this is your budget, says that the government position gradually deteriorates, that our fiscal condition deteriorates. These are your numbers.
What it shows, Mr. Chairman, is
your deficit path.
It's a good chart.
Your debt path.
And it shows just exactly what I said, which is if you look at 2012 for the next 10 years, it stabilizes that debt burden as a share of the economy. So and then what happens is, and it's exactly what I said.
And so we'll just allow it to take off after that?
No, and then you're right. And as millions of Americans retire, then those costs in Medicare and Medicaid start to increase again. And that's why we're saying openly and directly to you that we're going to have some work to do. Now,
well,
what you
that's
do,
one way of putting it.
No, but what you do is, I think on your budget, although I know you're going to have a new one coming, is you would lower that path in ways that would substantially increase the burden of health care costs on middle-income seniors. And although we agree with you, we're going to have more work to do, but we're not going to adopt an approach that would undermine that basic benefit.
Go ahead and show slide 8, if you can. So you brought it up. I know you didn't necessarily want to see this chart. The red is the status quo. That's the baseline we're on. The green.
You could have taken it out to 3,000 or to 4,000.
So this is last year's budget. Yeah, right. We cut it off at the end of the century because, the economy, according to CBO, shuts down in 2027 on this path.
But I'm glad I like that chart. I saw this chart yesterday. But if you look at you're talking about I think more than half a century going out. But if you look at the gap between us,
I understand the gap
between 10 and 20. It's a pretty small gap. And that gap, though, that 10 to 20 gap, which is all we're debating today, is a gap where you're achieving that slightly diminished path.
Here's the point, if you can let me, because this is your time, so it'll just take a long time.
Okay.
Here's the point. Leaders are supposed to fix problems. We have a $99.4 trillion unfunded liability. Our government is making promises to Americans that it has no way of accounting for them. And so you're saying, yeah, we're stabilizing it, but we're not fixing it in the long run. That means we're just going to keep lying to people. We're going to keep all these empty promises going. And so what we're saying is, in order to avert a debt crisis, I mean, you're the Treasury Secretary of all. If we can't make good on our bonds in the future, who's going to invest in our country? We do not want to have a debt crisis. And so it comes down to confidence and trajectory. Do we have confidence that we're getting our fiscal situation under control, that we're preventing the debt from getting at these catastrophic levels? And if you go back to the preceding chart, number 13, you're showing that you have no plan to get this debt under control. You're saying we'll stabilize it, but then it's just going to shoot back up. And so my argument is that's Europe. That is bringing us toward a European debt crisis because we're showing the world, the credit markets, future seniors, people who are organizing their lives around the promises that are being made to them today. We don't have a plan to make good on this. And
Mr. Chairman, as I said, I don't. Maybe we're not disagreeing in the sense that I made it absolutely clear that what our budget does is get our deficits down to a sustainable path over the budget,
back off.
over the budget window. And why? Let's talk to why do they take off again? Why do they do that?
Because we got 10,000 people retiring every day, and healthcare costs going up.
We have millions of Americans retiring every day, and that will drive substantial further rate of growth in healthcare costs. And so you are right to say we're not coming before you today to say we have a definitive solution to that long-term problem. What we do know is we don't like yours.